Okay. In this afternoon, we have to know better some case studies. The first one is about the presence of our contents as cultural roots in our websites, as the website as a space for the access to the heritage by the wide public. And of course, it was better for us to present the website of Atrium and Sandra Nauert, that is our web expert, web writer, will present our website with attention to the communication of our contents. Federico, vuoi questo?
La connessione che...
Non lo so. Non ce l'è.
Entra nel browser.
Ok. Si è verificato un errore sconosciuto.
Infatti qui dice si è verificato un errore sconosciuto.
Non sei connesso.
Non siamo più connessi, devi entrare nelle
Al vicini.
Fast web. Immetti la chiave.
La chiave qual è?
Adesso ricollego.
Ci chiede la password.
Ah, aspetta.
Il relatore ci sente?
Sì,
Devo
sì.
chiedere.
Penso di sì.
Can you hear me, Peter Charles? Okay, fine, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thanks for giving me room to speak. My name is Sandra Nauert. I am teaching, and I have been doing research at the University of Bologna, and I was happy to collaborate with Atrium for almost 3 years, because there was a collaboration between the University of Bologna and the Atrium Association to analyze dissonant heritage promotion and communication, and to figure out some heritage communication strategies for Atrium having difficult or dissonant heritage. So one of the major outputs of this research project was the website, which you may know. I don't know if you have looked at our website. And I will share today with you some insights about this analysis of dissonant heritage communication, about the risks of communicating such dissonant heritage, about the strategies that I found and applied to the website when implementing it. In fact, we're talking about making the cultural heritage of Atrium accessible on the website. So, as I just said, I will address risks and strategies. I will then go a little bit into the communication on the web in general, which is not only an Atrium question or related to dissonant heritage, but a bit more in general. And most importantly, everything started out with sources, because in the very beginning of the research project, everything was about collecting data. So I collected everything that was available of data related to the Atrium case studies, meaning to all the sites of the partners that are in the Atrium project. But not only, I also collected data on other examples of dissonant heritage, because obviously there's lots of dissonant heritage around the world, or even in Europe, that is not part of Atrium, and it could be a good reference for my work as well. And finally, with all that information, which was not only text but also image, but with the textual information, I constructed a text corpus in order to analyze the text, mainly of promotional material, but not only. So that was the starting point. Before getting into the strategies, I would like just to really shortly address the notion of dissonant heritage. According to Tunbridge and Ashworth, which are most prominent researchers in this field, dissonance in heritage is a contrast of meaning and values between the past and the present. And in the case of Atrium, the contrast is between a democratic values of present-day Europe and a non-democratic past from which these architectures originated. So be it the fascist regime in Italy or the communist regimes in other countries of southeastern Europe that are part of the route.
Sandra, did you share the screen?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Sorry, Peter Strauss, can you see my slides, right? Okay, thank you. Okay. For this reason, Atrium has a political and ethical position very clearly enunciated in its statute to avoid the risks I anticipated, where Atrium states that it's dedicated to the principles and values of democracy and does in no ways accept expressions or forms of historical revisionism. You have the entire excerpt on the slide. We don't need to go into too much detail. But talking about risks, so there is quite some risks when communicating dissonant heritage, because there's the risk to be celebrative, there's the risk to be misunderstood, or there's also the risk to be then accused of historical revisionism without being it or wanting to be it. That can be easily demonstrated with a comparison of the architectural treasures of the thermal towns of the Massif Central, where a celebrative language is used to promote these architectural treasures, but analogously we could not talk of architectural treasures of totalitarian regimes of Europe's 20th century, because that would sound like historical revisionism. In fact, there is a little anecdote that happened in Forlì, Claudia probably reminds very well, when in the Cesare Valle exhibition, there was just a text about this exhibition which said the restoration and reuse of the former ONB building that was restored offers a perfect opportunity to celebrate its creator, Cesare Valle, an architect by vocation. So actually we're not saying anything wrong, but evidently there were critics, and the word celebrate, which is referred to the architect, was somehow confused with the celebration of the regime that is behind the construction of this architecture, or also of the architect who might have some relationships with the regime. So what did Atrium do? The same in quite to repair this little misunderstanding. A new text was put on a big what's that called? On a big poster at the entrance of the exhibition, saying, while maintaining a strong repudiation of anti-democratic regimes, Atrium intends to evaluate this material heritage, the restoration of the exterior building represents a perfect opportunity to reflect on this architecture. So the verb celebrate was substituted by reflect. It's just a verb, but it makes a big difference. This to show you how important it is to have great attention to language when it comes to communicating this particular heritage. So how then can such dissonant heritage be promoted? We will have a look at 4 possible communication strategies. There might be more. Those are the 4 I came up in with my research. And I will refer to examples that I found in my data collection, and I will then show how I applied them on the website in my text that I formulated. These 4 strategies are a kind of crescendo, meaning that they go from very simple to much more complex. And in any way, they are not separate from each other because they're intertwined and may be used simultaneously more than one at the time. So one obvious strategy consists in simply avoiding celebrative language. And the example you can see on the screen shows 2 sculptures in Forlì. One on the left-hand side is Ebe, the magnificent sculpture of Canova, a neoclassical sculpture from the beginning of the 17th century. And on the other hand, we have the sculpture of Icaro, which is in front of the former aeronautical school that was created during the fascist period. So there is some fascist propaganda around this statue, obviously. So this statue, we would not describe it in the same way like as Eve, but we need to be rather non-celebrative. In fact, it's described as the monumental and not the magnificent Icaro. Okay, so this is my web text that I designed for the promotion of this architecture, of this aeronautical college, which has mosaics in its interiors. I guess you saw them in some video. And also here I used the adjective monumental rather than magnificent or any other evaluative adjective. And I also used the term unique, which I think is not going too far in celebrating it. A second strategy I identified is to simply make dissonance explicit, say that something is actually dissonant. That was an approach I found in the promotional materials produced by one of the Atrium members, Dimitrovgrad in Bulgaria. And they wrote, to revive the past does not mean to flood it with a wave of nostalgia. Living the past is an attempt for a historically responsible and critical look on the events back in time. So they're simply expliciting that we're talking about a dissonant heritage and straight away tell us that we need to look at this heritage in a critical way. Something similar applied on the website for the texts describing the heritage of Tor Viscosa in Italy, where they have a documentation center which gives the opportunity to explore the history of the town in a critical way. A third strategy is that of emphasizing reuse in the past. This is an approach that has been used by Atrium from the very beginning, already starting from 2013. Architectures that had a meaning in the past during the fascist regime today might have a different meaning, not only meaning but also a different use. And in the case of Labin in Croatia, they created a quite nice slogan, say, the mine of culture, the public library of Labin, because the buildings around in the former coal mine were transformed and reused as a public library. So where once there was fascist exploitation, today something has grown to be a cultural project, giving access to culture to many people. So it's converting the meaning from what it once was. When I wrote the web descriptions for the partner of Predappio in Italy, I also used this because they have a former factory, a former airplane factory that is now used for a scientific laboratory of excellence. So I designed this text, science at the end of the tunnel, to say what was once maybe going in the wrong direction in a dark tunnel has now turned into something worthful, into an excellence program of science. So it's also here a new use, a new meaning, converting the meaning. Okay, my fourth and last strategy I would like to present to you is maybe the most powerful one, and it to promote dissonant heritage, and it's to convey the dissonance through a contrast. So initially, if I said we cannot use celebrative language, in this context we can, because we're contrasting it. So it changes, because if we say, as we see here, terribly yet wonderful, we're saying yes, it's wonderful, but it also has something terrible attached to it. So this was an exhibition in Luxembourg by a project of Totally Lost. Claudia talked about it, exhibiting photographs of...
Recording in progress.
At the beginning of the Atrium live.
Mm-hmm. And the introductory text of this exhibition was terribly yet wonderful, reminders of architectures and ideology whose past can still scare us, which also means it's something terrible because it still touches us. At the same time, it's something that might be beautiful or wonderful, or that somehow fascinates us. So we're contrasting something that is terrible, but at the same time, in some way, takes our fascination. It's not... No, proviamo così. This is a strategy actually used also in other countries. I have found this approach in two German exhibitions, one in Nuremberg and the other one in Obersalzberg, which is not in Germany, it's in Austria, sorry. And they did something really similar, fascination and terror, at the documentation center of the Nazi party rally grounds in Nuremberg. So at the one hand, it's very terrifying, on the other hand, it's fascinating, and the same approach was used in Obersalzberg in the documentation center, saying deceptive idyll, something that seems idyllic, but in reality behind it is not. Transferred or translated for our Atrium website, we have a really beautiful thermal complex in Castrocara Terme, which is part of the Atrium route, but to not celebrate it and just say, oh, it's really beautiful, because as you see, it is very beautiful. I created this text, illusory beauty. So it's beauty, but it's also an illusion, because behind all this beauty, there is a terrible ideal, or there was a terrible ideal of the fascist regime that built it. I'll just read the text to you. The thermal complex of Castrocaro Terme is a splendid example of beautiful Art Deco, perfectly merged with modern architecture, almost leading us to forget terrible ideals that behind the regime which built it. Okay, yes, this very quickly were the 4 strategies I found in the materials and tried to apply to our website. This is obviously very Atrium specific because Atrium is a dissonant heritage. When creating the website, obviously this was not the only aspect I had to consider, but this was one aspect that was important for writing the texts. But I would like to share some, just some other aspects which are not complete. They're just some of the elements that I thought might be interesting to share with you. So when I planned the website, one of the questions was to define the target audience, think about the communicative objectives, and about the personality of Atrium cultural root. That is obviously something that I did not do by myself. That is something I had to do, or that did the leading people in Atrium. So they were my interface, and I learned from them, and I tried to apply what I learned from them. Another aspect that was really, really important was the aspect of images, because images and text, there's a very strong interplay. We all know that, and it's becoming more and more important to have visual material that is interrelated with the text. And finally, I will just address very shortly how to promote the website. These were the aspects that arose when planning the web project. So first point, defining the target audience, and the communicative objectives. Who is the audience? Which are the communicative objectives of the website? And in the case of Atrium, actually, the challenge was to address a diversified audience and to pursue also diverse communicative objectives. There is not a single communicative objective, and there is not a single or homogeneous audience. In fact, the website promotes cultural tourism. It wants to raise awareness on the topic of dissonant heritage. At the same time, it is also a knowledge platform, providing lots of resources. And finally, it is also a way to communicate with institutions and also to attract potential members. So it has various objectives and various audiences, as probably in the most cases. How can such a challenge be faced? Well, for this reason, a multi-layered communication approach addressing multiple audiences was the choice. In fact, according to Francesconi, who's a researcher at the University of Trento, in order to communicate a complex heritage, we need a multi-layer communication, which means a combination of institutional, audiovisual, promotional, informative texts within a digital environment. And probably this is not even, this does not end within the website, but this extends also to other digital environments such as social media, which are indispensable, I think, which have become really important in the last years. Another crucial point when communicating to diverse audiences is that the various sections or the menu points in a website need to be clearly recognizable to be of interest to a specific audience. So a researcher who wants information about the Atrium website needs to find quickly where he can find resources, so in a library or in materials or resources normally. So clear naming of the menu points and the sections is very important. And then there's the question of the tone of voice. Which tone of voice do we use if we have various audiences? It probably depends, or we chose to make it depend on the content. There is content who addresses more than one audience, then we need to adopt a more universal design that can be fine for any kind of audience. Whereas in more specific sections that are addressed more specifically to one rather than to another target group, we can address a more specific tone of voice that is adequate to a specific target group. Well, then something that every cultural route probably has talked a lot about is defining the personality, the image, and the key messages which need to be conveyed on the website. Here are just 3 points. There could be much more. It's just an example. Obviously, Atrium promotes architecture as a window on history. It promotes cities as a museum space that needs to be discovered or that can be discovered. It promotes also the fundamental values of the Council of Europe, but this is just 3 examples. It's a very long list. It's not the topic here to define Atrium's personality, obviously. And when talking of personality, however, in the case of Atrium, it was very important to define the approach to heritage interpretation, which in the case of Atrium is a constructivist approach. You've talked a lot about it. Atrium adopts a bottom-up approach, a participative approach involving the community, which leads to multiple perspectives, allowing for multiple and diverse interpretations of this heritage. And in the end, it's also Atrium also adopts a connective approach, which means that local stories connect with each other into a greater whole that then forms a common memory regarding this topic. So, concerning images, I already mentioned that image and text are interact. Verbal and visual information need to be harmonized. This is a theory that from Kress and Van Leuven, which has already been stated in the 90s and which is today more important than in the 90s, but they were ahead of their time. The decisive role of photography then, especially in the tourism discourse, and cultural roots are in the tourism discourse. And if we think about it, an image does already interpret a place. And then the text that accompanies the image produces further meanings. And it makes a big difference if we put a picture in black and white or in color, especially in the Atrium context, but probably also in your context, because it creates another interpretation, another atmosphere, and so on. And also the perspective of a photograph can change a lot. So these are all considerations that need to be made when choosing photographical and visual material for a website. I thought I changed that slide. I didn't. That's the old version. Yuppie. Okay. Never mind. When writing for the web, it's not on the slide, but I'll tell you anyway. I think two crucial things we need to keep in mind. Two crucial things. First, a website is a non-linear text. So people won't read everything you have on the website, they will just read a chunk, and they will not even read everything through the text, but they might just read here and there. So for this reason, we need to be concise, and most of all, we need to put the most important information on top and then get more specific. Another important thing, these are things you probably all know, is obvious to breaking ideas up into small paragraphs, to chunk information, and eventually, if we have lots of information, even given lists or bulleted or numbered lists, and very important also to use subheadings. This is for better readability. And the promotion of the website, because if the website is nicely done and nobody visits the website, we also have a problem, and we all use Google Analytics and see that we would have to have much more visitors than we actually do. So how can we promote this, the website? One obvious way, as you all know, is SEOing, search engine optimization. SEO can be done on 3 levels. On a linguistic level, using keywords. Keywords should appear at the beginning of the web page, in titles, in links, in tags. They should be clear, informative, and concise in wording. Then we can do SEO on architectural level. That means on the linking structure is decisive. So the hypertext structure that creates the it means to, okay, so we need to create a good hypertext structure through internal links. So internal linking of our own web pages is very important. And these links also need to be descriptive. We should not use click here, but the link should already contain information on the content where it leads. And finally, reputational SEO means that we have links that go and come from other popular and topic-related websites. All these things contribute that our website will be found more easily, because writing for the web is also writing to be found. So if we use all these things, we probably will be found better. That is just one thing. So as I already anticipated, promoting the website also happens within the so-called communication mix between website and social media that become a so-called global system within this communication mix. And for example, attractive web pages can be shared on the social media channel. So on Facebook we can write, oh, have a look at this website, and if we have followers on Facebook, they probably end up on our website. And I'm missing a slide. I'll try to integrate anyway. So actually we need to orchestrate the website and the social media. They also have different aims, because the website gives many detailed information, whereas social media gives more little bites of information that are more specific and on a very engaging. It's also another language we use on the social media. Yes. And it's more informal, it's engaging, and it's on single instances. And since in social media we give small bites, small portions of information, they should be scheduled. They should be scheduled because people like routines, and it's important to have a regular and consistent activity. I'm no expert in social media, but I found this was just to finish up the discourse of the communication mix and remind myself to be more regular. I have 2 slides left. You have been talking a lot about archives in these days, and well, a website is obviously not an archive, but I think it can be said that the Atrium website, however, keeps track of the association's activities, of the association's events, and also many news, because it has become somehow a chronological little archive of all the association's life. Moreover, the website has a library where there is a growing number of digital sources, mainly scientific publications. And finally, the heritage section of Atrium is not so little, because it actually describes over 200 sites, quite in detail, with photographic material, with captions on architecture, the building date, etc. So it is actually already a collection of Atrium sites. It's not all of the Atrium sites, because when we designed the webpage, we decided a maximum of 5 heritage sites per partner. But still, it is growing, because more and more partners are joining. So, and also it is quite coherent, because there's a general scheme that has been applied to all the partners, how to present in it's always the same way. We have a slideshow. I can go on the website. No, I can't. I can't. Anyway, yeah, there's a sliding show with all the pictures and captions that refers to image, and text is related. So I try to make captions to interpret the image. And it also has a description, a general description of the site and of the town, and then of the 5 sites that had been chosen. So, and it's the same for all of them. And then the communication within it is what I just had said. In all the text has been applied the 4 strategies to promote the heritage. So I'll just close with open questions, because there are many open questions for our website. For example, we would like to expand the library and make a database out of the library. And in this moment, this is obviously a huge question and a huge problem, and involves lots of decisions also on how to digitize the many physical publications we have. But that's one of the open questions and one of the objectives. There's copyright questions and so on. Then there's also the question of different levels of access to such sources. So will they be free? Will they be reserved? And finally, how to digitize such physical collections. You probably heard these days about this. I was not always present, but we will get updated. So I hope I was not too fast, not too long, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sandra. Questions? Everything is clear, I think. It's a lot of food for thought, and even if we have different items to communicate, some of the points are really, when listening to you, to me, I was just thinking there's a lot of work to do ahead, even if every day we go on researching, investigating, trying to do the best, also to keep keep up with what the contemporaneity of social media and updating their websites requires. So it's a lot of work and a lot of work ahead and a lot of study ahead to communicate the best way possible and the integration with the social media and publications and so on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, more or less. I'll just.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
My question is, I was very interested in your concerns over using the word celebratory or celebration at the very beginning. And I just wondered, is that a concern that is raised by certain sections of the community, perhaps people of a certain age? And do you think that will change over time and that people will perhaps begin to celebrate the architecture, take it out of context perhaps with the time and the social and human effects that happened. I just wonder whether people of a certain age who lived through these times perhaps associate the architecture with their own personal experiences, whereas younger generations, they're far more separated and do not have those associations. And I just wonder, at some point in the future, will we be celebrating the architecture more perhaps than we are today?
Definitely, a very, very interesting point. Thanks for raising it. Yes, I do think so. Obviously, the critics did not come from young people, but they came from, I don't know, from which generation, but definitely not from young people. And I think it will definitely change because the generation that lived through that and has such types of associations is it's going away. I think probably we are the last generation that strongly associates such memory to these buildings. But maybe it's actually the work of Atrium to not make even young people forget about the associations that are there and to remind it's one of Atrium's objectives to have this built heritage, even though it's getting older and the history is getting, it's more far away, much more far away for the generations that are to come, but to keep on being a reminder of what they represented once, and in that way, in line with the Council of Europe values, promote our democratic and human rights values and so on. So, but yes, I do think that the problem that young people will find a language too celebrative definitely will be less present. I hope I've answered at least partially your question.
Thank you. Yes.
That's all. So thank you very much, Sandra.
Thank you.
And fai tu adesso, giusto? C'è qualche altro? No. Ok, so I